welcome back. Now, this evening we have Warren Black back from Thailand, freshly tanned. Look at him go, nice and fresh. And once again, we have Connor Marshall. So thank you so much to both of you for being here. Tonight's really more, roundtable Q&A. We're going to be discussing, all things asset protection. If you've got any questions, just pop them in the box for Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them. And also in regards to, just generally what's happening in the world, if you've got any questions, you can pop that in there as well. But ultimately, we've got an event coming up this weekend, which we are going to cover shortly. We're really pumped to be back in person. We're nearly sold out in our in-person tickets in Perth. So if you are in Perth, we will put the link in there shortly for you. But ultimately, there's a lot to talk about there, isn't there, guys? There's a lot happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Thailand first, Warren. How was your trip and what was your synopsis being overseas and away from Australia?
Look, I think it's confirmed more than ever to me the importance of being sovereign, because you go over there and there's no way whatsoever in heck the world has gone back to normal. I think it's more that we've been let out of prison on parole. That's how I describe the world right now. It's like we're on parole. So you can go to Thailand. It's a ghost town. There's not many people there. They're still talking about this restriction and that restriction, and New Zealand have just brought in more COVID restrictions, and Qatar and other places are talking about it. So I think it's kind of like the way the government's handling this whole thing now. It's a little bit like meeting someone who's just talking about using WordPerfect and whether they're ready to move to Windows. It's like everyone else in the world has long moved on from WordPerfect and on Windows or Apple, but someone's still doing it. So everyone else is sick of COVID, sick of this, sick of that. And it's still kind of, governments are still trying to go on. And then at the same time, you've got political governments being very aware of the devastation of the economy and at least trying to give some impetus. So it's an interesting stage. You had, when there was virtually no cases, all kinds of restrictions and lockdowns. And now that there actually is very serious cases and more of it happening, it's really proving what I said all along. It's purely political, purely about economics. It's purely about game playing and stuff like that. So Thailand was amazing because, just talking to people on the other side of the world and seeing just how much people, the rest of the world saw it. And the thing that I noticed, it's universal. I don't think I've had a single person who wasn't fed up with masks, wasn't fed up with the absurdity of his stupid jabs that have made next to nothing difference. If anything, are killing people off. And I think people are seeing it for what it is right now. So that's what I observed really going over there. And it's definitely, short-staffed at the airports. I mean, the check-in lines are pretty large. I mean, I'm meant to be flying to go away again in a few weeks' time. And I'm kind of like, I'm so cautious about this sort of stuff. I've actually booked 2 flights of 2 different airlines, to go to Indonesia, just in case one of them cancels on me. So, that's the extreme I'm at right now with it, and I spend hours planning my trips because there's just so much to do. And it's showing me that the way of the world moving forward is if you want to be on top of things. That's what, whether it's your health, whether it's traveling, whether it's your economics, because the small details will trip people up. That's how I see it. Good time to be on top of things right now.
Yeah, you either want to be on top of things or you want to be a politician. Those are your 2 options.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's your 2 options. No. Yeah, look, things are quite unpredictable, but something that we're also going to be discussing, and we had Mike Thornton on last week to talk all about the quantum and the psychological warfare, and there's so many different ways we need to prepare. So look, let's talk first and foremost more logical, more practical, and then we can talk a little bit more into everything else, because we've heard lots and lots from the World Economic Forum. You're going to own nothing, you're going to be happy. But good old Klaus Schwab. But in principle, Warren, you also teach that as well. Have nothing under your name and you're going to be happy. So can you talk a little bit about this? Because with the Great Reset and all these things, is there an actual way where we can really prepare to protect our hard-earned assets?
Look, where I'm at is that something I found with dealing with most of the high net worth and people I've worked is that what really is wealth? The original meaning of wealth, when you actually look at the definition, comes from wele, which is W-E-L-E, which means well-being. So, and I think I always say to people, if you have the choice of being in immaculate health, having a life full of meaning and lots of joy, but having a simple income or having a very large income, a large amount of money and being miserable about meaning, what would you choose? Having poor health, very few people, say the latter, lots of money. And in fact, there was a study done in the US years ago on general happiness to find out the level of income to bring people happiness. This is about 10 years ago now. What they generally found was that anything less than, I think it was around about 50,000 or 60,000 people struggle to be happy. They found that once people went above $150,000, to their astonishment, that the level of happiness started to drop. They seemed to find that people with a fairly reasonable income, but they had enough to be comfortable, but didn't basically have big incomes and lots of possessions, were generally happier than people who had large amounts of income, like $1 million doctors or whatever, who had all these assets and debts. So I'm not saying you don't have a lot of money, but if you're going to have a lot of money, you have to have meaning to be happy. And I can remember sitting with a very high net worth person. He actually said to me, money is basically proportionally related to your level of meaning and happiness. You give more money to someone with meaning and you increase their happiness because they can do more good. Like someone like Angelina Jolie, you give her more money and for her it brings her more joy because she can then use it to help more kids in orphanages and set up more animal refuges and hospitals. So for her, you can see someone who has a huge amount of meaning, and money does give her that kind of thing. Whereas for someone without meaning, what more money does is lead to debauchery. Because in other words, people start, like, you got lots of money, you don't have meaning, you got all your needs met, so you don't have much else to do other than start paying for big parties, paying for big hooker fests, just whatever else you want to basically do. So yeah, look, I think this whole great reset to me, first, it gets me back to what's important, what wealth is. And wealth is to me all areas of life. That's all of it.
Yes.
And obviously part of it is not having poverty and scarcity. And obviously if you've got real meaning in your life, more money can enhance your ability to help. Like for me, the more I get meaning in my life, more money enables me to do more things, to help more people, to do more of these webinars. I mean, if I didn't have much money, we wouldn't be doing most of this stuff because it costs money to set up a membership site. It costs money to have you guys working with me. It costs money to have membership sites organized. It costs money to have a good bookkeeper. It costs money to do all the stuff we're doing it. So if we didn't have a lot of money, really we would just be doing fundraisers or doing basic things like that. So money for me makes a big difference, and I enjoy making more money because I can do more really good stuff. But if you don't have a real meaning in your life, this great reset is going to be a big shit heap. It literally is going to be horrific. So if your trust is in your money to give you happiness and security, you are going to have a problem. And that's my belief, because I remember years ago reading about a very wealthy man who lost everything, and to the point that he was living on a park bench, and he got his money back. And he stayed pretty at peace. And they said to him, when did you first know that you were wealthy again? He said, when I was lying on the park bench. In other words, he knew that Eckhart Tolle was very successful, went and lived on a park bench homeless for 2 years. I can remember at one stage years ago when I had really bad health issues, moving to a lower class area in Perth, living there. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I noticed I felt at peace. The stress of me having a lawyer job and working long hours and making lots of money was gone. And at the time I was living in Rockingham, or actually Hillman, which is a very low class area, living in my mother-in-law's house in a room without a proper air conditioner. Grace and I had William. We had 2 more kids on the way. And honestly, I was happy. I remember I was enjoying it. I was involved in a work in a church, giving back. I was helping a lot of people, and I had enough money just to basically be comfortable, and that was all. And I thought, you know what? I'm really happy, like really happy. And I noticed that when I started building a big business at first, I got caught up with the responsibility. My joy left me. 5 years later, I had miles more money and I was more miserable. And it taught me a big lesson because I was so consumed with getting money and bringing it in. These days, it's why I really just enjoy life. And I think that the Great Reset, if nothing else, first and foremost, realize what your well-being and sovereignty actually is. It's in all areas of your life. It's having some meaning, having yourself in good health. And that's why the Global Wealth Club, we've been talking with Ho Bing Lo, the doctor, to do more stuff to teach members about health. And then once you start to do that, then start doing things you enjoy doing and find a way to make money doing things that you like doing. Like I like speaking on webinars. I really do. I like helping clients in mentoring. I do. I I don't like sitting in there doing up documents as a lawyer. I get miserable doing that. And even though I could go and do that and make a lot of money, I don't enjoy it. Whereas I found a way to do this. I'm actually making probably more money now than I was making as a lawyer. Took a while, but I am a lot more money than as a lawyer, and I'm a lot happier with doing it. So I would say to people, just getting back to what's important to you, what you enjoy doing, having meaning in your life, but then at the same time, then paying attention. It doesn't mean you then go, oh, I'm living a great life. I mean, in fact, now that I'm inspired and I'm enjoying money because it's got meaning, it makes me more inspired to protect my wealth better. I just did a whole webinar with our advanced Accelerate members where I was talking about structures, family office, foundations. So yeah, like now for me, I value managing money more than ever and protecting it. And the way you're going to protect it is, on all 7 areas of life. First of all, getting your mindset around the fact that there's always a way around every stupid law, always a way around it. There's always a way around it. There's a way around this great reset. And it starts with your mind, clearing the blocks in your mind, and then putting the structures in place to back it. It's that simple.
I love it. Warren, it's pretty simple too. Like when you found yourself in that health situation, that health crisis, because there's 2 types of mindsets. We've got the growth mindset, we've got the fixed mindset. And a lot of people who found themselves in a lot of trouble, they've just got a fixed mindset. They don't want to grow. They don't know how to. So were you at a stage where you kind of stopped pursuing more education for yourself and pursuing more? Is that where you got stuck? Because I feel a lot of people right now, even people who know what's going on, they may be a little bit scared to grow and to expand their knowledge in this area in asset protection because it's overwhelming. And it's like, where do we start? How much money is it going to cost me?
I don't blame people. Look, I was saying before to someone that number one, the more money people make, the more easier I find it is for them to spend money because they value it. They know the importance of good structuring. They know the value of good advisors. There's a good reason why the average high net worth in Australia spends 2 million on their tax financial advisors alone each year, because they know the value of that. The other thing too that people have a struggle with, and I had this struggle myself, Jasmine, I don't like getting bored. I naturally like to have fun. I get bored quickly. I get bored with relationships. I get bored with projects. I get bored with businesses. And in the end, I had to learn to enjoy boring. Now, how do I do that? I make sure I always do things that I enjoy doing. But if I can see a reason, like right now, I'm doing a lot of work with you and the team, as you know, in getting the company more orderly, more systematic, working with Grace, who's driving that, of course, in the background. But then I'm working with her and helping her as she drives that project, and then all of you guys as a team. And I'm enjoying that because I can see a bigger picture. I can see the result of it is I'm more freed up to do more fun things and do more what I like doing more. So you can do boring stuff. And like for me, keeping my wealth safe and protected, it's boring, but I enjoy it because I also know years ago when I went through a very bad time in my life, the one thing that saved me going bankrupt was how well protected I was. And so I know that like getting car insurance, no one likes spending their car insurance, but you're dang glad you spent it if you crashed your car. So yeah, look, it's overwhelming, but it's what will save your ass if you've got problems, protecting you. It gives you a chance when the reset happens that you suddenly wake up and you've got your assets and your next door neighbor doesn't. I'm sure you're going to be very relieved other than waking up, realize you've lost everything because it was overwhelming and it was in the too hard basket. So yeah, life is challenging. It was challenging to go out just to eat in a cafe without someone trying to muzzle you up and shove a needle up you. That was what life was like. Life is very challenging on this earth. And yeah, look, if you want to do the realm of finances, either do it properly and manage it, or just become an employee, live day to day and hope it all works out, and just live simply. Like that is not an option, just go simple. Just don't take the responsibility. Find a way to live very basic, go off grid, learn to make your own food or learn how to live the simplest life. And I know people have done that. So you have minimal income. I met guys when I was traveling up north who that's all they were doing. They were literally living simply. Every now and again, they wander up to a cafe, work for a week or two, work some hours, make some cash, just enough basics. The rest of the time they were fishing, they were living simply, buy enough food to live, and they were living off grid, in their caravan. So that is an option too. If you don't want the responsibility of a lot of money, just do that, But if you're going to live in this city, in this Western world, within this current system, you'd be crazy not to.
Yeah, that's right. Who here is resonating with what Warren's saying? And Does anyone here genuinely have a concern about their assets and it being taken away from the government or losing it? Because, you know, it's a good thing to recognize if that is something, and it's more important to take action. All right, so let's talk about probably one of the biggest assets everyone has concerns about, especially coming through the Global Wealth Club and consultations, and it's their property, it's their house. So if your house is under your name, which a lot of people it is there a simple way around that in order to change that and be able to protect your property?
Right. So your property. So can I understand? So what you're saying, are you talking about protecting the property from lawsuits from the Great Reset government? What are you talking about exactly?
It could be in any way. Well, asset protection to cover you in every aspect, but many people are genuinely concerned, especially with the bank regulations changing and all those things, that their house will be taken away from them.
Well, yeah, that's okay. Property is one of the property. There's two ways you can protect your property or issues here. The first one is very doable. That's protecting you from people suing you, from governments taking legal action against you. Yeah, that's where things like second mortgages come through. For example, I noticed Louise has asked about how to know more about it. So Louise, what you can do is if you go into the free trainings on the Global Wealth Club site, in fact, I'm going to be nice to you and I'm just going to put the link up for you. But if you go into that one, go into the free solutions, there's a button like protecting your asset to minimizing your tax. And yeah, I'll just send you a link to that and you'll see, you know, there's things about how to protect your property and all that there. And we will be covering that at the event on the weekend as well. I'll be really going through protecting your wealth from your property or from whatever else. So that kind of stuff, there's things like second mortgages, there's buying property in a structure, there's all that kind of stuff. The second issue is, can you protect properties from governments just taking it off? And the short answer is the biggest problems with property is that you don't actually own your property in Australia anyway, and you never have. It's when Australia was founded under colonial settlement by Great Britain, Britain was a monarchy and they basically put the Governor General as what's called the sub-monarch, which means we're still a monarchy where the Governor General really runs the country. And even though it looks like the politicians run it, they really don't. But, you know, they're more managing it. The Governor General working with the Queen has final say. Now, the kind of title that you got is what's called the freehold crown title. Now, when you understand property law, and I learnt this in law, the crown or government ultimately owns the property, but you get what's called a special interest in the property. So that means provided you pay your taxes, and if, in fact, the exact thing it said in the legislation was pay your peppercorn rent every year, which means you effectively can keep your property. So effectively you got what's called a form of indefinite leasehold on the property. So governments can pretty much, in a Great Reset, if they really went that far, they can take it. Now, and there's not an awful lot you can do about it, other than basically, yeah. But in saying all that, do I think governments are necessarily just going to go and take everyone's property? I'm not so sure they would do that quite so quickly, simply because could you just imagine what would happen in Australia if they did that? I mean, the whole thing would collapse. We'd be in an apocalypse for that to get that extreme. I think what's more likely to happen is that there'll be certain, look, they'll kind of tighten up on it and then they'll bring in greater taxes, or then they'll kind of, if you
They'll
don't
make it probably a lot harder, you think, to own your property.
If you don't meet the social credit requirements, you may not be able to own one, or you may have something else. I mean, those kind of things are very feasible. Just purely just saying one day, hey, we own all your property, it can happen. I'd be very surprised if it happened. And if that happened, there's not an awful lot you can do about it, really, unfortunately. But in saying it, the risk is so low. It's, you know, protecting against the things you can control. And that is why we teach balanced portfolio, because at the end of the day, if you've got all your wealth in property and a problem happens, you're in trouble. If you've got all your wealth in cryptos, as some people found out in recent times, you're in trouble. You know, you've been in absolute horrible trouble the last 6 to 8 months. If all your money was in gold, basically, you know, from 2009, 2018, you would have lost 80%, you know, a very large percentage. You would have had a very large drop, you know, so balanced portfolio brings stability to your wealth. You can protect against your property against almost anything, even in terms of dealing with governments kind of, you know, limiting it. I mean, again, you know, I'm a big believer in having second mortgages, that kind of stuff. It definitely means that if they did try to take property in theory, you can kind of and force a sale of the property. At least in theory, you've got an argument to get some of the money back yourself. So there's a lot you can do in that sense.
Yeah. I think you raise a good point there with the balanced portfolio, Warren. That's something I've noticed is a commonality. Most of the people that are very fearful about losing their property, what I've recognized is, even though it's kind of everyone goes against this when they say your home is your greatest asset, that's what a lot of people believe. Obviously, everyone can have their own thoughts about that, but generally the people that are charged have most of their money in their principal place of residence, or they're just heavily invested in the property market. So that's one thing I've noticed. And for a lot of people here, if they're in that boat, maybe that's a good time for you to reflect and realize that it may be time to start to learn some more about the balanced portfolio and ultimately start to spread your risk a little bit more if it is a worry for you.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so our property isn't our only asset. We have many other types of assets, and something that we were here to ask, which was sent in, was what are the most important assets to protect over the next 3, 5, 10, or even 50 years? Is there anything more in particular we should be focused on, or is this once again, everything?
Can you get the crystal ball out, Warren?
It all.
Anything you want to keep. Anything you want to keep.
Yeah. Anything. What about your dogs? Do you have to protect your dogs as well?
I mean, anything you want to keep. I mean, do you really want to protect Larry, Jasmine?
Of course, he's great. He only knits me 3 times a day now, not 20. For anyone who's wondering who Larry is, that's my puppy. Okay, so we're not crazy people over here.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go that far, Jazz, but
no, we are crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, look, you just want to protect. Yeah, look, the short answer is, I bought a camper trailer recently. I bought it in my foundation. I don't have virtually anything in my own name. Like, I don't see the point. I think that as much as possible, I may as well copy what Mr. Gates and Mr. Buffett, apart from, jabbing people in Africa. I'm not going to copy him on that, but I am going to copy him on how they structure their wealth. Yeah.
Look, I think that's so true. And if there's something that we can learn from, these people that are absolutely absurdly crazy and psychotic, is that they are doing things that are protecting themselves and they're setting themselves up. So, we can all learn to do the same, and you can do it for good and for your family.
The elite always set the system up so they can get out of it. And there's a great scripture in the Holy Bible where Jesus was talking with his disciple Peter. And Peter has this encounter with the religious bullies of his days. And these religious bully guys were saying to him, "Hey, dude, does you and your masters pay tax?" And Peter was like, "Oh, shit, I better..." He said, "Well, yeah, of course we pay tax." And Jesus goes, "What are you going on about? Like, why are you saying that, you pay tax?" Because the thing to realize was, in that time, the Jewish or Hebrew currency was like a shekel, a gold or silver shekel. The Roman currency was a coin that was Caesar's coin and a picture of the emperor. So that's why there's an old saying that Jesus said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's and God what is God's." In other words, if it's Caesar's currency, give him what he's due. If you're not in that system, then stay out of it. It's a very powerful thing to show you, but everything that you engage in commercial is a voluntary. But the biggest powerful thing that Jesus said that I wanted to kind of allude to, he said to Peter, "So who do you think pays taxes? Do you think the kings, like the Clintons, the Rockefellers, Mr. Gates pay the taxes? Or do you think it's the peasants and the little serfs?" And Peter said, "Well, obviously the peasants and the serfs." He goes, "Okay. So therefore the sons of God are free from tax." So what was he saying to Peter? He said, he said, once you realize that you're a son or daughter of God and you're basically not part of that whole thing, no, of course we're not paying tax. So Jesus said, "I don't pay tax," to Peter. And even to this day, that whole principle carries down. If you have a foundation set up, but it's a church where you've got sons or daughters of God, spiritual teachers, you're tax exempt. If you set up philanthropic foundations, and so Mr. Gates and Mr. Buffett and Miss Clinton and Chelsea Clinton with a $120,000 watch are very aware of that. They have their foundations and they work within the system. So the way I learned how to tax plan and protect my wealth, I wasn't all that smart, really. I just went and academically, I just went and had a bit of a study of what Google, the Seventh-day Adventist, the Catholic Church, eBay, Facebook, worked out everything that they were doing, and I just copied them. And it worked. I even got audited on it, and they go, "Yeah, no worries." So you don't need to do any weird and wonderful things. Just the elite are never going to set the system up so they can pay tax. Gates and Buffett and all that are never going to go, "Oh, shit, man, we better pay some tax." So let's just kind of make it watertight. The only tax laws I've ever seen that are almost impossible to get round, and I think that God, Buddha, Jesus, and the Dalai Lama wrote them together, is the payroll tax laws. I mean, the payroll tax laws are literally, I've never been able to find a way around them legally, but in saying it doesn't matter because no one pays it unless you've got a big company and you're right within the system. That's why they don't care about it, because they just operate from offshore companies and ignore it. So, but yeah, it's when you understand the system, it's fairly easy to deal with. It's just that most people are being beautifully brainwashed and programmed by the media, their accountants, and the thing when you think about it, we've been brainwashed to a system where we depend on a government provider for our energy, we depend for our gas, for our water, for our food. We depend upon a government for a license just to work as an accountant, as a financial planner, just to do shit that really there should be no reason that you just can't go out and do it. Even to fish, like you got to get a license for. A licensed, you need medical help. Most people go to a doctor who's paid for and licensed and going through some absurd organisation called the City of London, which is this kind of inner group of cartel that existed in London. It's a corporation. And when you join the bar as a lawyer, you swear an oath to these buggers, and you do the same as a doctor. So we're in this kind of system. And if you're brainwashed into that system, and it was very hard to unprogram myself out of it, you're going to pay taxes, you're going to get vaccinated, you're going to do this, you're going to get that, you're going to be living in hope. Whereas when you're no longer in that system and you're like Jesus said to Peter, the son or daughter of God is free, and you're no longer part of that shit, taxes, you pay taxes, but you want to pay because you want to contribute and give back, and you don't sit there getting yourself basically slugged just by some absurd government organization,
Very good.
I mean,
Have you got anything to add to that?
I'll let Connor add in a minute. Let me quickly show something. I mean, what I tell people is this is the order of creation. I've done this in webinars, but it's really important. You've got God or source, which basically creates man, woman. I'm not going to put transgender, even though technically there should be a third gender, but you're genderless. But, we'll leave that.
Just put they instead, Warren.
Sorry?
Just put they.
No, we're not changing it.
You put what?
They. That's politically correct, right? No.
Oh, whatever it is. Yeah, let's put neuter, just to keep the neutral people happy. And what's called persons, slaves, okay? So that's the basic order of creation. Now, most people are living around this level here, okay, under governments. Whereas man and woman over here knows that ultimately you're accountable to God, which means to do good by their fellow man, fellow woman, life, liberty, property. I do the right thing by you, Jasmine, if I give you my word, because I'm accountable to God, I'm sovereign. If I give Connor my word, I keep it. If I can't keep my word, I quickly talk to him about the problem. Whereas people on this level are always doing things they really don't want to be doing, but feel they have to do out of fear. So that's the basic matrix. And you really want to getting yourself out of that and getting your wealth protected and getting into a higher way of thinking. Anyway, Connor, I'll let you speak now so that people don't feel like a mascot.
I'll bounce back to the old question that you asked before, Jasmine, that Warren started with. But still, I think, and we touched on this last week, but the most important asset to protect over the next 3, 5, 10, or even 50 years, I'm still a big believer that's always going to be your mindset and your mental state. Because if you don't have that, what do you have at the end of the day? So definitely that in your health. I think it's more just a matter of with all the stuff that's been going on the last year, what are probably the ways that you can actually protect that long term? Because we have so much outside influence from our friends, family members, sometimes solicited, sometimes unsolicited, social media, the news. So it's really just a matter of how do you actually keep that mind state fresh. And I think it'd probably be good for you to start this, Jazz, because it's a bit of a running joke with the team here that you're a little bit of a social justice warrior back in the day and you're a lot more grounded now. So, for being someone that has notoriously kind of been caught up in those circles, Jazz, what do you think is the most important part to really keeping, that mindset intact and being able to not take on too much outside influence in that mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. It almost made me emotional when you said that, because I think most importantly, what it really was to me was actually recognizing that the fight that we call it, that's external, if we don't have ourselves, you know, like looked after on the inside, like we can't love ourselves, we can't look after our basic needs, and then we're trying to go out there and fight the world and fight the government, ultimately you're like stuck in this trap that's set for you to lose because you burn out. And when you burn out, you know you're no good to yourself, you're no good to your family, you're no good to your community. And you know what? That's the ripple effect out in the world. And I had a really good hard look in the mirror at the end of the day when I felt so unfulfilled, I felt so unhappy, I felt so overwhelmed by the burden of the world, that I just thank God for Warren and for the team that spoke into my life, because it really just took me from going one direction. And literally, guys, I had to radically decide I'm no longer going to be a slave to the system, whether you want to call it freedom fighters, you know, enslavement, whatever it is that you want it to call it, the matrix. Because ultimately, like what Warren said before, what you said, Connor, go and do what you love to do. The only one who is stopping you from doing that is yourself. Because like Warren said, there is always a way around every law, around every situation, around every bad relationship, around whatever it is that you're facing today, there is always a way. So thank you for asking that, Connor, because I really want to encourage everyone here tonight. If that's you and you're just like, I'm not taking the plunge because I'm not ready, well, what sign do you need to be ready? Because I can tell you right now, there are many people in this world who are not ready. They're not ready, but you just have to start with where you're at and don't live in fear. You know, fear is such a bad vibration. Warren, I know you can talk on this because you've met, you know, you've had to heal yourself. Connor, you've been a PT, you've worked in health. Fear is such a bad vibration for the body that it will make you sick. It will make you sick. I have someone in my family right now who is so frozen from fear. He's physically and mentally sick. I know he's going to push through, but this is a time where you have to rise up and you have to put a team of people around you who are going to help you get through this. Am I right?
Pretty much.
Absolutely.
I mean, my whole idea of sovereignty, I mean, for me, sovereignty in all 7 areas of life, you know, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, social justice, everything. And I know for me, still to this day, I get regular counseling. Is it because I got mental health problems? No, it's because I plan to stay in exceptional mental health. I mean, the other day, I went and saw our friend Robert, you know, and I had a session with him.
Awesome.
And he said to me, honestly, I don't need to see you. He goes, you're just too good at the moment. He goes, you're in good shape with everything. You know what you want. He said, contact me when you need me. And John Thompson said the same thing as me. So I really just do it once every month now, once every 6 weeks. But yeah, when I was in fear and I had a lot of stuff coming up, I knew that having all the money meant nothing if I couldn't be in good mental state. So I was doing that, seeing good kinesiology and energy worker, getting my diet in order. I still do good physical Pilates because I know that if I want to enjoy my wealth, I want to be in good physical health so I can get in my camper trailer, go out, you know, and not be sitting there in agony in my back because I've got an injury like I had at one stage. And I mean, I was speaking to a client the other day, you know, a really good client, quite wealthy, but yeah, he's had a back injury, he's got various stuff going on. And yeah, you could see, he just wants to fix it. So yeah, look, all I can say is just take action and fix stuff if stuff's going on, like really deal with it.
Yeah. And start with where you are at. You know, if you're someone who's not even in tune with your body, for example, well, get in tune with your body. Start to find out what it is, you know, that's going on with yourself. And preventative health. Yeah, Warren's put me onto some great people that help me weekly. And without them, honestly, you know, you just can easily get unbalanced in this world because there is a lot of energy going on. So in saying that, we're all solution focused here. We're always about taking action. This weekend, guys, we have our first event. Well, not first event, but, you know, first big event that we feel like we really put a lot of effort and energy to listen to everyone, what you're looking for help with. So asset protection, we're talking about mindset. Connor, share with us what we're going to be opening up the day with and who's going to be speaking, and Warren, jump in when you would like to. Let's and please put the link in, team. So if anyone wants to purchase online, you can. And if you want to come to Perth in person, we've got a couple more tickets left at the Trade Winds in Fremantle. Go for it, Connor.
So thanks, Jazz. I'll go into the first 3 sessions that we have for the day. So the first is actually going to be myself and Edward. So most of you should be familiar with who Ed is. He's the CEO of our company. We're going to be going through the sovereignty wheel. We're going to be doing a really good exercise on helping people identify where they're at. and where they want to get to, because at the end of the day, we're going to help these people to come up with a solution as how they're going to get from point A to point B. Because I think a lot of people right now just need clarity on the steps. And ultimately, if we can give them clarity around the steps, we know a lot of people are going to walk away with some actionable steps they can take to becoming sovereign, which is the most important thing. Next up, the next session will be with Warren. He's going to be discussing where the world is heading. The reason that's going to be important and beneficial for people to pay attention to is because if you know what's coming, it's much easier to prepare. So I'm excited for that because Warren's always had some great insights about what's happening. He's having a bit of an uncanny ability to always kind of see what's happening ahead of time. And then the next session is going to be once again with Warren, and that's going to be overcoming government psycho warfare against your health, wealth, and freedom. So more in the mental state, and this really goes back to what we were just talking about, Jazz. Your mental state is really the only thing you can be guaranteed you're going to have for your lifetime. So that is first and foremost the most important thing to protect, because if you want to be a sovereign individual, your mental state is going to play a huge role in that. And then after that, we're going to have morning tea, which is my second favorite time of the day, behind lunchtime, of course.
And that was a little clap. I'll probably be fasting, but still.
You can just smell the cupcakes or something, Jazz.
Yeah, I'll smell it. Who else will just smell a cupcake? Because yeah, it's not too good. Just put a note there as well. If you could put the questions in the Q&A, they just get lost in the chat. It's just a little bit difficult to follow that. Sorry, Connor, and were you still carrying on, or was it now Warren to mention?
Yeah, Warren, do you want to take it from there?
Warren, mention around the psycho warfare, around the governments. I know you're really passionate about this area as well as manifestation, spiritual warfare. So just enlighten us with what you're really going to be bringing to the table, because I know you're extremely, extremely passionate about this subject, and this is what you love to teach.
Yeah. Look, one of the things I've done, is that the way I used to get exceptional results for myself for protecting my wealth, and I've been audited by Legal Practice Board, I've been audited by Tax Office a couple of times. ASIC, and every time it went very smoothly. And I can tell you now that the first thing was actually getting my mind cleared, my energy cleared, and creating an intention. And I remember when I first got the audit from the Tax Office notice, I sat down there and I created an intention as to how I wanted it to go. And I did some energy work on myself, ready to go. And literally everything I did the work on happened as I did it. And I've taught people this, that they've even found in studies by shamans and spiritual work that people who track tax audits tend to be people who are very either fearful or very inattentive to their stuff, or they hate government. And so people who tend to be afraid or hate government, there's these universal laws, and in quantum science now, they're teaching that people's intentions and belief systems will create their realities around them. There's a very good physicist in Oxford University called Dr. Amit Goswami, who in his PhD thesis a number of years ago, he studied quantum physics and quantum science, and he concluded that literally everything that we see in our life around us is created by our awareness. And there's a guy called Joseph Murphy who wrote a very famous book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind, which one of my business mentors said, you've got to read this. And almost every major business mentor, it's like the Bible of this stuff. And basically The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles is another one. Free book you can get online. They all talk about this universal, what's called energy or formless intelligence that can be, but by impressing our beliefs on it, can create our realities. So there's also a guy called Gerald O'Donnell, and I spent some time in Florida. He's one of the world's expert in consciousness and science. And Gerald, you can find him online. He wrote a whole thesis and study, and used to go and train major corporations and traders, because many traders in derivatives would make money then lose it. And he always found that was a consciousness and a fear that they weren't dealing with. So he specialized in teaching people on how what you're impressing with your thoughts creates your reality. And he did a whole training on how to overcome that. And so basically governments are very aware of this. And, Bernays, when he was consulted many decades ago by the governments to bring in the New World Order and to assist with the process, he taught them the importance of gradual mental impressions upon the population to create a conscious collective reality. So the elite know this very, very well. Henry Ford, if you go back and find some of his old books, talks about how he financed a book by Lady Queensborough, who taught about occultic or, symbols that can be used to impress belief systems upon people. And he got targeted for doing it and got his factory firebombed, but he's showing how it's done. So understand that the elite know, and you can do all the research for yourself. Don't believe me if you don't want to, but they've found that literally what you impress upon people's consciousness, and if you take it on board, you start to manifest and live out in your life. Like you'll notice this if you're around a fearful person in your family and you keep being around them, you'll start thinking like them. I noticed when I was around a guy the other day who I've joined up with something, and he was literally, he's depressed and got trauma. I left it about the next hour. I felt really depressed and down. And I thought, why am I so depressed? I'd taken on his energy. So I had to clear myself. So the whole idea of Amit Goswami, as well as Michael Talbot in the holographic universe, talk about this thing that they found that that Einstein originally taught that what you see creates your belief systems. What Goswami, as it's now categorically shown, along with many other scientists, is that what you believe and you see creates your physical reality. So it's the other way around. So if you see scarcity, if you see governments coming after you and taking everything from you, and you believe that strongly enough, you will create that reality, like you will. And so it's very important to take charge, especially when you're living in a very low consciousness country like Australia and various others in this area where we're living in this convict way of thinking and people trying to coerce you into this and put guilt trips on you for that. Like I know when the whole COVID thing and the mask was going on, I could feel the energy of coercion just by walking into a shop, and you'd feel it. Like even walking about a mask, I could feel the stares, I could feel the glares, I could feel the fear. And I had to learn to really master my thinking. And most people just gave in and got vaccinated or wore masks because it was just too hard. So I realized that what psycho warfare will be teaching is to really understand how you're being programmed every minute, every hour of the day by governments, by social media, by family, and how to clear your energy and learn to do it on a daily basis in the same way that you have a shower every day to keep your body clean from dirt. You learn to keep your consciousness and mind clear. And in fact, Connor, I wouldn't mind getting you to say something, because you joined up with the Global Wealth Club like 6-7 years ago. And I remember you actually said it changed your life, you know, how you were very much in this debt way of thinking and employee way of thinking. And even recently you said to me, can we do some more clearings and work on the soul psycho warfare again to learn to manifest? Because I feel I need to get back into that thing. So maybe you can share about how it changed your life and got your and got your whole way of thinking different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just comes down to having the full picture of things, Warren, because you can take all the practical action you want, but you know, if you have those subconscious blocks or just those blocks that are out there preventing you from doing it, it doesn't matter how much action you take, doesn't matter how much manifesting you do, you're going to consistently find yourself just headbutting the wall over and over again. So I can only talk from personal experience, and you know, clearing is not something that I get up and teach. But I've definitely seen firsthand just the manifestation and clearing side of things, how much of an influence that had specifically in my work life and my finances first and foremost. That's where I used it. And it's been a useful tool ever since. And it's something I always find that I cycle back to when times get tough. That's generally my first go-to. It's not to try and dig harder and do more stuff. It's generally getting back to basics and getting my head right. And it kind of flows from there. Yeah.
I love that, Connor. That's just so perfect, that analogy, to come back to yourself. Like, we're always looking at that external. And I think, you know, your thoughts, your perception, everything that we've discussed tonight, you want to master this, and you're going to trust us. You're going to want to master this area of your life, because for what's to come, it's not about fear mongering, but it's about preparation. And it's like, you know, we're at war. We are at war. Are you tired from what you went through the last 3 years? Well, it's probably going to get worse. But if it comes down to your perception, and that's the experience that you're going to have, well, you're going to be much more prepared if you really know how to clear those blockages. And I know Warren is I love hearing Warren actually teach on this, because honestly, we do it as a team, don't we? As soon as we feel like there's a blockage somewhere, we get together, we do clearings. We do this because if we don't, you know, we're not living by example, then how can we tell others to do it?
Well, as you know, this was my passion most of my life. And then I was, in fact, Stephen Pettit and I talk about this. Stephen, we say, was a businessman who got more interested in this. I was more a shaman and got more in that, who got more into business as a kind of, I went the other way around for me. And I've made this my whole life study. It's one of the things I love the most, because I found that when you get that side mastered, you can just manifest what you want. And I found that I just tend to get the right people, the right time, the right things like that. And I know guys like Tony Robbins, John DeMartini, you listen to any major wealth teacher, Eckhart Tolle, they all talk about this energy and what you're picking up. And DeMartini says, if your business has people, for example, with financial scarcity, it will weigh down your company. And I noticed that even in our business, that when we start dropping in our cash flow, first thing I check is ourselves. Have we moved into scarcity as leaders? But then I start looking what's going on with the team. And even recently I found a couple of members of the team are feeling like a bit cash squeezed and things like that. So we immediately went to address that, because all of us are a collective organism. And when you study the teachings of Dr. Goswami, for example, and he says that everything in science, they've proven, we are all interconnected consciousness. Like every one of us are connected to each other. So we're all learning from each other. We all feel what each other's going for. You know, poor old Jasmine and Kerry, they often get called for me saying, what's going on with you guys? Because I start feeling that something's blocked. And I know that it means normally Jasmine's gone out of balance, or someone else, or whatever else. So it's very much like that. And when you actually get on top of it, it's life-changing. Like you'll be able to see the difference with the Great Reset. You start to change the way you think about it. You start to live a different reality to everyone around you. So yeah, I'm passionate about that. And that's why I actually said I wanted to present that, because you may remember we had someone else going to present on the psycho warfare. And I said, no, I want to do this one. This is something that I'm excited about. Because I know that if we get this side right, people will get more inspired to get their structures right, and they'll get better results. That's I mean, is there anyone else here who really enjoys that kind of stuff, like learning about how you know, collective, like esoteric, the consciousness, and how you can actually manifest and create this kind of stuff and make your life a lot easier? Just if you are, just type in the text chat. I'll be curious if this particularly resonates with any of you. Yeah, few of you, yeah, look, by all means. So the event will be covering this quite strongly. Myself, Mike's going to be teaching on there as well, on the remote viewing stuff. So yeah, look, definitely come along to this if that interests you as well, because we're going to be covering it from a practical wealth creation aspect, but also from an esoteric. That's going to be what's different about this event.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, if you feel that there are other people that are interested in this, share the link with others, because we are online. We are really available to anyone, even overseas. And as I said, tonight's the last night for you to be able to secure the last couple of tickets left in person in Perth. So if you're in Perth, click the link, come and see us, come and meet with us, come and have a coffee with Warren and the team, and, you know, a really excellent day. So yeah, does anyone have any kind of final questions? We generally like to keep this around the 45 to 50-minute mark, because there will always be a replay. And also for the event, yes, if you have purchased a ticket, you will have a replay as well that will be sent to you a couple of days after we've edited it, okay? Now, if anyone's got any further questions, Connor, have you got any final words tonight?
No, we do have a couple more sessions in the day as well, just around protection of property, cash, shares, which is obviously very important with the times we're heading into. We're also having Stephen Pettith do a presentation on the balanced portfolio. So for those of you that were listening before and it kind of pricked up your ears and you're wanting to find out more, Stephen is going to be there. And that is one of the most important things you can do as a sovereign individual. So if that's something you're just starting or don't really know what it is, I'd highly recommend grabbing a ticket just to listen to Stephen. He's fantastic with all that stuff. And obviously we've got Mike Thornton as well doing remote viewing, which you can use remote viewing for just about anything. But for some people that may be looking for an alternative source of income, that's a really great way to stay sovereign, because you can do it anywhere at any time. And yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
I love remote viewing. It helps me. Before I travel, I remote view. I want to see if there's going to be a problem. And like with Thailand, I was a bit nervous about doing it because of all the stuff. And all my remote views told me it was going to be smooth, and literally it was smooth. So yeah.
So good. Yeah, I got clearings done before I went on my trip to Sydney with William, and they were the best flights I've ever had. And coming from someone who was a flight attendant who had some traumatic flight experiences, honestly, the power of your mind and clearings and manifestation is just wonderful. If you can add that to your life, you're going to change your life forever. So
Raymond Grace, who of course I've done a lot of webinars with, who's a world master in this area. And Raymond basically said that. Sorry?
We need to invite him back soon.
No, he's keen to come back. We're going to get him to do a webinar with us again. But Raymond teaches about everything is energy, and energy can be transformed. I remember when Raymond taught us about how you can clear the airports energetically so it's smooth. And every time I remember to do that, it's smooth. And every time I forget, it's not as good as when I remember to do it. You know, so you go there because you literally do create your hologram. Like what you see the world as, you will manifest it around you. You really will. It really works.
Because the reality is we are always manifesting, whether you realize it or not. So you may as well tune into it and actually manifest what you want. Because everything that's happening, we're all manifesting it all the time. So it's just really about refining that and, learning the practicality of how you do that. So
if you haven't read The Science of Getting Rich, everyone, too, have a look at that one. That's a very good book by Wallace Wattles. It's a free book. My mentors, when I first learned with some high-level wealth mentors, they all said to me, just get that book. The guy wrote that book as a favor to help some people out, and it's just brilliant. It teaches you about how it's a science. Like literally, you cannot fail to get wealthy when you follow what he says. And it's true. When you read what he says, you cannot fail if you follow what he says.
That one.
Yeah,
Have you read
cannot
that, Connor?
fail.
Sorry?
Have you read that, Connor? I haven't read that
No,
one.
I haven't read that one. No.
All right, that's on the list. Who's going to read that?
Yep.
It's free as well.
And
so
all he
hello.
pretty much says is you impress with your mind. You just see it, you feel it, you know it, and you stay in it. He said it's all you. And then he said you still take action, but once you see it and know it, the action becomes clear and you just take it. It's so true. That changed my life, that book.
I love that. I've been listening to a lot of Joe Dispenza, and he talks a lot about that. Yeah. Walking into your future, doing it, believing it, unlimited thoughts. So awesome. All right. Does anyone have any final questions? Because we're so excited for this weekend. As I said, the link is there. You can join us online. You can join us up until the day. But please do share this, guys. We really want to get the word out there. We really want to help as many people as we can. And ultimately, it's been brilliant once again this evening. Thank you so much, Connor. Thank you, Warren. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. All right, just making sure there's no final questions. We'll be back next Wednesday, and just keep in touch with us. Once again, if you've got questions, find us on Facebook, YouTube, support@globalwealthclub.com. Otherwise, thanks, Connor. Thanks, Warren, and take care, everyone, tonight. Sleep well. We'll see you soon.